Hello. Oh my goodness, it's been a while. It's Sarah Dallal. I feel like I was on a hiatus for a while, but if you know me, I was always in the background. So I wasn't always although I wasn't on camera, I was still kind of around like a bad smell. But it's really, really good to be back. And I'm joined by the wonderful Curtis Daly. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I can't believe you just described yourself as a bad smell.
You know, and actually,
That's not
I'm
true. I
not,
can confirm that Sarah Dallal does not smell.
I actually don't.
Um,
I think I smell
and
quite.
a little false start at the beginning as well. This time it was me. Usually I got my tech on point, but this is going in the bin.
Yeah, it's got to go. It's got to go. Yeah, tech issues, but you know
Give
what?
us
I
money.
feel like character building, isn't it? At this point, character building.
Yeah.
But yeah, really great to have you, Curtis. I'm excited to get into the show. But coming up on tonight's show, we have Nigel Farage keeps dodging debates with Zach Pelansky. Andrew Rosendale becomes latest Tory to defect to reform. Putin has been invited to Trump's peace board. And finally, the elites don't want you to have your own computer. But just a reminder, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. But on to our first story. Nigel Farage, he loves the camera, but this time not so much. Now, leader of Reform UK skipped a BBC interview where he'd have faced the Green Party leader Zach Pelansky. His no-show came as Farage's ally Donald Trump stoked an international Greenland controversy. Farage has been accused of running scared after he failed to show up for a high-profile BBC interview. The Green Party's new leader, Zach Pelansky, revealed that he agreed to appear on Laura Kussenberg's Sunday Politics show with Farage, only for Farage to pull out last minute and send his deputy instead. In Pelansky's words, Farage is, quote unquote, refusing to debate me. A pattern is emerging. It's strange, isn't it? Someone like Farage, a man who not only loves the limelight, but he loves hogging it. He's usually desperate to get himself on screen, and yet he's nowhere to be found. So, who did he send instead? Let's have a look.
The president is completely wrong. I think we're all utterly united, both here in the UK political scene, but also actually across all of the other NATO allies. I think what the president is most concerned about is the risk of particularly China, but also Russia, gaining an extra presence in and around Greenland, in the same way that he's concerned about the risk of China in Venezuela. And I think that's what's primarily on his mind. He's correct on that, but the approach in terms of the way that you work with your closest allies, all of your NATO allies, is clearly completely wrong.
Is it bullying? Is it blackmail? Some reporting suggests this morning.
We are close allies, and the point about friendship is that you tell someone when they've got things right, but you also tell them very clearly when they've got it wrong. And on this, the president has got it wrong. And the objective of protecting Greenland for all NATO allies is correct. The way that he's going about it is totally wrong.
I don't know about you, but his voice just grates against my ear. But is it any wonder why Farage might have bottled it and sent Richard headlights instead? Right when Tice was forced on air to admit that President Trump has got it wrong about Greenland, it appears Farage didn't fancy being challenged, especially about the latest drama involving his alleged Nazi friend Trump. Understandably, when your close friend is a baby like Trump, it puts Farage in a pretty tight spot. Farage likes to posture about sovereignty, yet he's also Trump's loudest British cheerleader. So when Trump slapped punitive tariffs on European allies over the Greenland dispute, Farage offered only a mealy-mouthed critique in a one-liner that practically sums up his pretty timid stance. He said, "We don't always agree with the US. These tariffs will certainly hurt us." He didn't say certainly, but he said it will hurt us. But I added certainly because it's absolutely going to hurt them. Reform is showing to be pretty weak, scared they won't be able to exchange match attacks on the playground, it seems, with their ally, the US. Let's circle back to what the interview with Ty, to that interview of Ty's when he said this. I think what the president is most concerned about is the risk of particularly China, but also Russia gaining an extra presence in and around Greenland, in the same way that he's concerned about the risk of China in Venezuela. And I think that that's what's primarily on his mind. He's correct on that, but that approach in terms of the way that you work with your closest allies, all of your NATO allies, is clearly completely wrong. I mean, it's hardly a full-throated condemnation, is it? Or I don't know. But why mention China at all? Because it plays into this bipartisan narrative that Washington loves. China's bad, Russia's bad, we must dominate everything. They are bad in their own right. But let me show you what China is doing, Donald. It's been said that China's opened 2,776 kilometres of new high-speed rail lines in 2023 alone, which is the equivalent of Japan's entire high-speed rail system. Its total high-speed rail now stands at 45,000 kilometres, or two-thirds of the global total. It intends to reach 70,000 kilometres of HSR by 2035. China is a factor in global resource geopolitics. Sure, I'm not ever going to deny that, but it's being weaponized in rhetoric far more than is presented on the ground. And the result, a dangerous, self-serving justification for American exceptionalism. But anyways, back to the pattern that Polanski pointed to, this whole saga also seems to underline this, that Farage craves media attention, but only on his own terms. When there's a chance he might be out-debated or forced to call out Trump, he'd rather disappear. Curtis, I mean, so much for the tough-talking man of the people, eh? You know, I'm a man of the people, I'm the working people. Catch me in the pub with a pint in my hand and I'll tell you all about the things that Britain needs. But why is it so hard for the likes of Farage to leave his Facebook meme bubble?
Well, first of all, when it comes to Chagos, no one cares about Chagos and the Chagos Islands. It's a weird political argument and political line the right wing have been pushing, particularly GB News. They're obsessed with it. But the average person does not care. I'm not saying it's not an important issue, but for some reason, people on the political right think this is something that people care about. They absolutely don't. And they're bringing up Chagos again. It's not very interesting. To talk about Nigel Farage and why he won't debate Zach Polanski, I think it's very simple. If you're debating against Keir Starmer and the Labour government, many cabinet members, they have no charisma, they have no policies, they have no vision. In fact, if you have no vision and policies, at least have charisma so you can debate. And no one in the government has any of those three attributes. So for Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, whoever, it's very easy to debate against. It's easy for the left, it's easy for the right. The problem, though, is, and this is what Nigel Farage didn't account for, is the rise, or the re-rise, if that's a term, the resurgence, that's a better use of the word, resurgence of the populist left in the face of Zach Polanski. Because he now knows that Zach Polanski has one, charisma, that's absolutely true. He has the policies and he has the vision. So Nigel Farage feels far less comfortable debating Zach Polanski. There's also things such as a wealth tax. Now, why am I talking about a wealth tax in terms of a debate? I think it's pretty obvious when it comes to economic issues, the left wing have the upper hand. You poll people, majority of Brits support left wing or centre left economic policies. 80% of people support a wealth tax. So when you have Zach Polanski versus Nigel Farage, and Zach Polanski says, I want a wealth tax, why won't Reform have a wealth tax? Probably because they took £2.3 million from, healthcare industry and the oil industry before the 2024 general election. It's very difficult for Nigel Farage to debate against. He can't say, well, actually, a wealth tax is bad. Nor can he say the regurgitated line of, well, the rich people are going to leave. Zach Polanski has that nailed down. So I think that Farage isn't confident in his own abilities. He's confident against wooden politicians. He's confident against those who have no ideas. But when it's Zach Polanski, it's going to be very difficult. And especially since Nigel Farage has tried to pin himself and the Reform Party as anti-establishment. They're anything but clearly that's the pitch they tried to go for. Once again, it's very easy when you come up against establishment politicians and the typical political speak, which is what Keir Starmer pretty much epitomizes. Zach Polanski, he sort of takes no bullshit. He speaks in a way in which the politicians don't typically speak. And of course, Zach Polanski pitches himself as the anti-establishment. Yet he can actually have real claim to that because his policies, or the Green Party's policies, is about taking on wealth and power, whereas the Reform Party is about protecting it. And he loses that edge. So I think Farage is uncomfortable with that. So he seemingly keeps dodging debates with Zach Polanski, apart from if they do it on GB News. But of course, GB News is Reform's home turf. And Zach is absolutely right to reject that kind of debate, because Zach's going to be not just debating Nigel Farage, he'll be debating the moderators too.
You make a great point, actually, and it probably points to, because you kind of answered my second question, it points to why they, populists like Farage attempt to curate the conditions so aggressively. But I still find that even if you had the likes of Farage, maybe I'm a massive pessimist, but even if you had the likes of Farage sit in a space with Zach Polanski, I think you'd still have people agreeing with Farage against the wealth tax, working people disagreeing with the wealth tax, and still, bootlicking billionaires essentially. So my worry is that one day, yes, and I do think Polanski will be able to handle his own. I'm not concerned about that. My worry is that Farage will still be able to accumulate popularity and have people continue to bootlick billionaires that don't resonate with them, don't represent them. So I wonder how we can actually navigate that. Does it depend on how well Polanski argues his point, or does it depend entirely just on who's just the most popular amongst working people?
Well, I don't think Nigel Farage is popular. In fact, I think it's pretty clear that he's unpopular. You looked at individual polling. Again, we take polling with a pinch of salt, but head-to-head matchups of Nigel Farage against Keir Starmer, against Ed Davey, against Gaby Badenoch, and Zach Polanski, he loses all of them. He's not ahead in a single poll on a single matchup. Even Zach Polanski, who was still relatively unknown to the wider populace, has a 1% edge. So one might think, if Nigel Farage is actually quite unpopular, how is Reform doing so well? And this is where I think a lot of people in the mainstream media don't understand. They often say, oh, Farage has created this narrative that he's the man of the people. No one buys that Farage is a man of the people. Everybody knows he isn't the man of the people. In fact, the appeal, or rather, maybe in spite of Nigel Farage, they vote for Reform and Farage, not because they like him, people that is, not because they think he's going to change the system. It's because they're sick and tired of the Conservatives and the Labour Party. And they're like, do you know what? Nigel Farage is an asshole, but maybe we need an asshole. In the same way Trump won. No, I mean, apart from the MAGA cultists, right? The average person knew Trump was an asshole. You could point to so many things in which he said and did horrible things. That didn't matter to people. So I think there's a kind of a false reading here where people think Nigel Farage has convinced people that he's the man of the people and people believe in him. No, people know he's an asshole, but they're willing to vote for him anyway. So I think that's a really big factor in all of this. In terms of creating a narrative, this is the playbook of the right wing, which is that typically, apart from immigration and some culture wars, because of course there is I don't know, people are convinced by some form of social conservatism, the right wing do have the upper hand. When you have debates, right, they'll say, what is a woman? Oh, a woman who can't have a penis, you're crazy. And of course, human biology is far more complicated than that, but it doesn't really work in a 30-second soundbite, right? They probably have the upper hand on that sort of thing. But again, when it comes to the economy, they don't. So what do the right wing do? They often lie about left-wing positions, because if you were to have an honest, straight-up debate about the economy, majority of people want to see our public services in our public services in public hands, not in private hands. Absolutely. They want to see a redistribution of wealth and power that includes a wealth tax and even raise an income tax on the richest. They don't want to see austerity. They want to see investment. What's the right-wing project on the economy? Austerity, tax cuts for the rich, and privatization. Nobody wants that. So right-wing politicians and parties can't go to the people and say, this is what we're about. What they will say is, oh, well, the Green Party are going to raise your taxes because they want to spend more. They're going to flood the country of immigration with open borders. Once again, that's not a Green Party policy. And that's the way they create the narrative. They lie about their opponent, in which the left, I would say, maybe I'm a bit biased here, the left don't often lie about the right wing because we know that ideas are so bad. We just expose the terrible policy ideas that the right wing have, which is often just reheated Thatcherism, what we've had for the last 45 years.
Well, I hope that people see through it, but I think I've got some questions that you might that I'm going to keep in mind for the next story. So we'll go to the next story so that I can ask you these questions that I have in my mind. But on to our second story. Andrew Rosendale becomes the latest Tory MP to join the other Tory party, aka Reform UK. Reform is becoming Britain's worst recycling project, but imagine it being an elitist one that's privatised and comes back to tell you that you're not rich or white enough to join. Anyways, I digress. Andrew Rosendale, the Conservative MP for Romford since 2001, has quit the Tory party and defected to Reform UK. He's the second Conservative MP to do this week. Ex-Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick jumped just days ago. And according to my calculations, I think that bumps Farage's band of MPs up to 7 in Westminster. And the timing is just, chef's kiss. Tory leader Kemi just said she was 100% confident no one else in her top team would defect, but there's a massive whoops there. Rosendale said, the failure of the Conservative Party, both when in government and more recently in opposition, to actively hold the government to account on the issue of Chakosian self-determination and the defence of British sovereignty, represents a clear red line for me. Since entering Parliament in 2001, I have consistently argued, both from the backbenches and the front bench, that the right of self-determination of the Chakosian people is sacrosanct, and that they alone should decide the future sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. Regrettably, these concerns have fallen on deaf ears. Both the government and the opposition have been complicit in the surrender of this sovereign British territory to a foreign power. This was made abundantly clear by the failure of Conservative peers to vote down the British Indian Ocean Territory Bill at third reading early this month, following direction from the top of the party. Sadly, I now believe that the Conservative Party is irreparably bound to the mistakes of previous governments and unwilling to take meaningful accountability for the poor decisions made over so many issues. Moreover, the views and concerns of constituents, such as mine in Romford, have been consistently ignored for far too long. To which Farage tweeted, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Rosendale to Reform UK. Andrew is a great patriot. The Tory lies and hypocrisy over the Chagos Islands betrayal tipped him over the edge. He will be a great addition to our May 7th campaign. Is this actually about the Chagos Islands? I mean, notice that no one from the Chagos Islands is talking. It's just the white men in suits talking about the Chagos Islands. Reform is seemingly becoming a refuge for Tories, it seems, licking their wounds over losing power. I think Andy was probably just a little bit too scared to get his P45 handed from Kemi. But let's unpack the Chagos Islands just for a second, because when Rosendale bangs on about sovereignty and betrayal, he's not talking about the Chakosian sovereignty. Britain literally evicted the Chakosian people in the late 60s and 70s, dumped them in Mauritius and Seychelles, and managed the main island over to the United States for a military base. So if there's a national sovereignty issue here, whose nation are we actually talking about? Because it wasn't Mauritius, it wasn't the Chakosians, and it certainly wasn't the people who actually lived there. Curtis, firstly, I just want to get your reactions. What do you make of this defection, and what does it say about the state of the Conservative Party that even this dyed-in-the-wool Thatcherite thinks the Tories aren't delivering, thinks that loads of mistakes have been made? Is there an ideological vacuum at the heart of the party? What do you think?
Well, first of all, once again, Chagos, as I literally just said earlier, the right wing seems to be obsessed with Chagos. No one cares about it. I don't need to reheat what I said earlier. So is there an ideological vacuum in the Conservative Party? I don't think there is. And I think that the ideology of the Conservative and Reform Party is identical. There's no difference between them. As we can see, I mean, easily we're seeing a multitude of Tory MPs and ex-MPs jumping ship to the Reform Party so easily. The reason why I think, well, it's twofold, really. The first reason is because it's easy to jump to the Reform Party because they believe in the exact same things as the Conservative Party and conservatism. You'll note that in the 2010 era, you had David Cameron as obviously Conservative leader, and he tried to sort of liberalise the party. And of course, when we break down the policies, it was still extremely racist and classist. But the rhetoric and veneer of the Conservative Party was to accept the so-called liberal order or political correctness. I mean, we had political correctness for about 5 years. A bunch of well-meaning liberals and people who had no class analysis liberals. I would say won the debate in that respect for a couple of years. That is preferable to what we've got today with just open Nazis. But the Conservative Party didn't actually change its views. It didn't become more left-wing or more liberal. It was just that was the nature of the debate. That was where the Overton window was. And that's how they got power. Now, obviously, the Overton window has changed. The Conservative Party can be far more open about its real reactionary views. And with the Reform Party, they've allowed the Conservatives to do that. But when it comes to the ideologies of both parties, they are exactly the same. They have the same view on immigration. They have the same view on the working class. They have the same view on economics. They're all Thatcherites who don't like migrants. That's it. And for Reform MPs or Tory MPs, that jump to the new party is easy. But the real reason, I think, is opportunism. I mean, we've looked at polling. Consistent polling shows Reform are going to win the next election. That seems likely to me. I don't know if it's going to be a majority or not, but I think it's likely they're going to be the largest party. I reckon they've had multiple conversations with Nigel Farage, Tory MPs, and they've looked at polling in their own constituency, and they're seeing, well, I'm going to lose my seat to Reform. And given that there's no ideological difference between the Conservatives and the Reform Party, it's easy. They just want to keep their seats. Now, in terms of how this looks, it's a difficult one, right? One might say, well, surely people are turned off by Reform because all these Tory MPs jumping ship, and aren't the Reform Party always attacking the Conservatives for destroying this country? That they are right, but they're right for different reasons. And it's true. So why would anyone trust the Reform Party if we've basically got the Conservatives jumping into that party? I do think it's had a slight negative effect. We've seen polling go down for Reform, but I don't think it's quite a crisis for the Reform Party, because I think the way people vote is very strange. Logically, you would say all the people that went to Reform, you see the appeal of Reform who hate the Conservatives, should now be like, well, I'm not voting Reform because they're full of Conservatives. But often people vote for momentum. People vote for those who are more likely to get into power. So therefore, people might not be particularly happy that we've got the Robert Jenricks of the world joining the Reform Party, but people often vote for a party that they think is going to get into power. And given that the Conservatives are polling third, fourth, whatever, and Reform are far higher, people are going to generally stick to the Reform Party because there's no alternative for them, right? 80% of Conservative voters have switched to Reform. There's no other right-wing party out there at the moment. So most people are going to stick to it. Where this gives an opportunity for the left and the Greens is to once again say they're clearly the pro-establishment party. Now, some might say, well, there's been Labour politicians that have jumped to the Green Party. That's true, although so far no Labour MP. But I think there's a difference here, and I think Zach Polanski can articulate that by saying there's a difference between maybe an ex-MP or a couple of councillors who are alienated by the direction of the Labour Party, and bringing on ex-cabinet ministers who did the damage of what the Conservatives did in the last 14 years. To be angry at the last Conservative government and then happily bring them on is different to a Labour councillor who realises that the Labour Party is for power and wealth and they've joined the Greens. So I think they can still attack Reform by being pro-establishment with that.
You kind of answered my question, because I think what really concerns me is the number of defections coming from the Tory party and the polling not really showing that a significant dip in Reform. It dips slightly, but it's not significant. You've got Andrew basically saying that the Chagos Islands was the thing that tipped him over the edge and not the 14 years of austerity, but whatever. He hasn't got a moral compass. But I don't have faith there's going to be many people who are wanting a change, who are craving a change, that will then say, oh yeah, the Reform Party is just a bunch of Tory MPs that just went to the other side because they were scared to lose their seat to Reform. Because Reform and the Tories really are not different. So I don't know, how do we shift people's perspective to make them realise that you're literally voting for Tory 2.0. You are voting in, or you will potentially vote in, a party that will continue adverse amounts of austerity that we're still trying to recover from.
Well, the first one to know that Andrew has been arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and rape.
That's why he fits in quite nicely at reform.
It's of course it's a arrest. I don't know if there's been any charges, but that's the sort of people that come to reform. How does the left convince people not to vote reform? Well, first of all, Zach Plansky's job isn't to win over all reform voters. Neither is it possible. You're going to have a cohort of people who are never going to vote for a left-wing party. That's fine. You don't need to go for them. What Zach needs to do right now is, a general election is not imminent. It's still in years. He's still building up his base, and he's doing a very good job at that. So whilst he should appeal to reform voters, not by capitulating, by making things about material conditions, because obviously everyone's in the same boat. Make it about class. You could be a reform voter and you still pay rent, so still pay your mortgage. That's absolutely vital. But whilst building his coalition, the main important thing is to get ex-Labour voters. And that's absolutely working. Many Labour voters are going to the Greens or the Lib Dems. So if he focuses on getting those Labour votes and making sure people don't go to the Liberal Democrats, then Zach Plansky is going to command 20% of the electorate. I know polling has shown that they're close by, but I don't think they're actually at 20%. If you get 20% of the vote, that would be historic, by the way, for the Greens, for any new political party. That's what's important, because there is going to be a subsection of society that will never be convinced by the Greens. They just hear clamp down on immigration, that's them sold. So if you're asking the question, how do we convince people that, reform are establishment because they're taking on a bunch of Tories, you've got to accept there's a portion of people that do not care and are never going to be convinced by your message. That's always been the case. Elections, and this is what the political zeitgeist always gets wrong, is that, you've got to reach to the other side and compromise and you win elections. That's what we're always told. When Jeremy Corbyn was Labour leader, he's gone too far to the left. He needs to get Conservative voters. Yes, you do need to get voters that voted for a different party, but you don't calculate in a way by moving left or right, because people don't think in terms of left and right. And alas, Jeremy Corbyn got 40% of the vote in 2017 by being unashamedly left-wing. So instead of Zach Plansky trying to reach over the aisle and try and go for people who are never going to vote for him, by the way, that's what Labour are doing, by the way. They're trying to pitch to reform voters and it's not working. As long as Zach sticks to his base, grows his base, and then gets 5-10% of those who are curious, that's fantastic. Usually a political party can command a base of 20%. Once upon a time, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party would have had a base of 30 to 40%. We're no longer in that era. Politics is far more splintered. And nowadays, getting 20% of your core vote is really good. You can win a majority on 30%. Shows how broken our voting system is. But you don't need a high amount of votes to win a majority. So 30% of the vote going to the Green Party in a couple of general elections' time is absolutely possible.
Fingers crossed. I hope so. Really, really great analysis, Curtis. But I'm conscious of time. So much hullabaloo in the political world, eh? But before we move on, it's 2026 and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put ourselves on the map. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a studio and for our contributors to be paid for the work that we do. We are all volunteers who have full-time jobs outside of this. So yeah, that would be great. Your support over the years has been amazing and we're kind of ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, as you know. So if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. And there you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for just 99 pence. But we do notice your support. It goes a long way. So we're really grateful. But yes, bear that all in mind. Right, on to our next story. After Donald Trump invited Tony Blair onto the so-called Gaza Board of Peace, Trump has managed to one-up Blair and invited Vladimir Putin. US President Donald Trump invited Russian leader Putin to join his Board of Peace to oversee next steps in Gaza, the Kremlin said Monday. Indeed, President Putin also received an offer through diplomatic channels to join this peace council. We are currently studying all the details of this proposal. Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters in a media briefing. We hope for a contact with the American side so that we can all clarify the details, he added. Trump announced the establishment of the board, which he touted as the greatest and most prestigious board ever assembled at any time, any place, on Friday as a key part of his 20-point plan to end the war between Israel and Hamas. The committee, chaired by Trump, will oversee the transitional governance of Gaza. One major question about this invitation is Iran. Iran and Russia currently have strong relations, so how will the two nations respond? From threatening annexation of Greenland to bringing in a long-time Western enemy into the fold, Trump is seemingly facilitating a global realignment. The craziness, though, doesn't end there. Look who else Trump has invited. The man who is currently doing the genocide of Palestinians has been invited on a board to help create a new government for Gaza. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Curtis, what do you think Trump is trying to do here?
Astonishing, isn't it? Really astonishing. He's inviting Putin and Netanyahu. There's a lot to unpack here, actually. So when we heard of the tariffs being slapped on the UK, 10% tariffs from the US because we supposedly stand with Greenland, which is going to rise to 25%. You saw a litany of right-wing pundits, specifically GB News, defend Donald Trump. They are defending a man who is bringing economic harm to this country. The so-called nationalists and patriots are acting like traitors, essentially. Now, some of the reason why, I'll call him up, Ben Leo, said, well, the reason why, I'm backing Trump on this is because he's the only man who can save the West. Trump is actually spearheading the Destroy the West campaign because what he's doing is making sure that the West is going to die. Now, don't get me wrong. Many people around the world, particularly the global south, hate the West for damn good reason because of our imperialism adventures and our getting rid of democratically elected leaders and installing corporate puppets and taking people's resources. That is understandable. But I said this the other day. 5 years ago, hell, even 3 years ago, it was unconscionable that you'd have European leaders talk about closer ties with China. If you said that on TV, the media and politicians would smear you as some, Chinese spy, for example. It simply would not be viable. You'd be called a traitor to the West. Yet European leaders are now getting closer to China because they're worried about Donald Trump. He's unstable. So the idea that we should be backing Trump because he's the man to save the West is clearly not true. He is facilitating a global realignment. And that's where Putin comes in. I mean, it's really, really strange, certainly against, Western foreign policy orthodoxy, to bring in Putin for this sort of fake, Gaza peace board. Now, why is he doing it? In my view, he's using this so-called Gaza peace board as a spring step to wider alliances. Now, we saw from the security documents from America in terms of their vision for Europe, and that was basically a fascist Europe. You had, Stephen Miller, for example, and the people around Trump you can see their desire to back far-right movements and far-right governments in Europe, specifically white nationalist governments. So, and again, I think that Donald Trump is less ideological than those around him. So when I speak about Trump, I'm speaking about the whole administration. I'm speaking about Stephen Miller and people like that. And Pete Hegseth. And they want to facilitate a fascist Europe. So what has this got to do with Putin? Well, let's be honest, game recognizes game. Putin's a fascist, Trump's a fascist. And therefore he's like, I want to bring this guy on board. I mean, he's bringing Viktor Orban onto this sort of Gaza board as well, who's also a fascist. There's also another wrinkle to this, by the way. And I think it's the more important one, given that I think Trump is less ideological than some of his people around him, is that this is about class. And I think when we look at the world through the lens of class rather than nations, it becomes far more clearer. Russia is an oligarchy, a officially, although America's an oligarchy. I mean, most nations are an oligarchy, but the inequality in Russia is absolute insane. The concentration of wealth and power in the hands of oligarchs is very real. And you also have to remember many billionaires, Russian billionaires, reside in the West. So Trump's, I think, affliction with Russia is ultimately about class solidarity. And whereas I would say the Washington political zeitgeist of foreign policy is, and the CIA is, they care more about nations than they do care about billionaires. Now, I'm not saying the CIA doesn't protect capital. It absolutely does. It protects capital. But for them, nations matter more. So they would absolutely see Russia as an enemy. Whereas Trump, he's class first, right? He doesn't care whether a nation is supposedly our enemy if you are a fellow billionaire. That's why I think he wants closer ties with Russia, because that's it's a class thing. In terms of Netanyahu, it just shows how this Gaza peaceful thing is utter fucking shit. Obviously, we knew that. But it's absolutely insane to me how open these people can be about this. Netanyahu is currently facilitating a genocide of the Palestinians, and he's been invited to be on a board of peace process to facilitate a transition of power in Gaza. And they're bringing in the guy who's doing the genocide. Of course, this is just absolute Western, a Western takeover of Palestine, basically finishing off the job of Israel. But usually politicians are a bit more coy than that. Don't get me wrong, I think if the Democrats won the last election, a lot of the things wouldn't be happening. They wouldn't be calling for the annexation of Greenland. But their Israel policy is no different. There's a slight different veneer here. Trump is more honest, accidentally honest about it. I don't think there'll be much difference between a Harris administration, given that Governor Shapiro, I forget his first name, was asked to be a double agent for Israel, according to the Harris administration. They asked him to be a double agent for Israel. So you probably would have seen something similar, some sort of task force to transition power away from Palestine, what little power Palestinians actually have left. But bringing on Netanyahu is so flagrant, so in your face, but it exposes what this so-called board of peace, I don't know what they call it, the Gaza peace board, whatever. Peace board, it exposes exactly what it is and what it intends to do.
Yeah, it's a geopolitical joke, really. I think I just think it's I don't even think Trump is accidental with it. I think that he is meticulous when it comes to his own vanity project, and this is a vanity project for him. He is determined, I think, to have an American-led oligarch. Like, let's bring Putin in, but let's not allow Ukrainians to have a seat at the table. Let's bring Netanyahu in, but let's not allow Palestinians to have a seat at the table. And you made a really, really great point about it being about class. I think you're absolutely right on that front. But I don't know, like, obviously it doesn't take Einstein to realize that the peace agenda is so utterly incoherent. Like, you're attempting to sideline existing institutions because you want the world order to be centered around Trump. Like, you want it to be Trump centered and completely surrounded by his say so. Like, even when I look at his I guess approach to Greenland, it's like everyone's kind of like, yeah, like it's just not good, is it? Like, we really need to do something about it. Like, this is not how you treat your allies. And it's like, why the hell has Trump even got a platform so big to be able to say, yeah, we're going to take over Greenland? Like, it makes zero sense to me.
It's like, sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's actually like comic book evil kind of guy.
Ridiculous, yeah.
He literally wants world domination, or at least the people around him want world domination. I mean, I think the guy is happy just to have his billions, but again, I think I genuinely think he has dementia. Like his cognitive faculties aren't there. Therefore, he can change his, and that's the thing. Like with Joe Biden, yes, he had cognitive decline, but the right wing were obsessed about Biden. But Trump's been in cognitive decline for decades, maybe like 8 years as well. I mean, the guy doesn't make sense. His brain is mush, which is dangerous because he's the president, the figurehead. You got Pete Hegseth and Stephen Miller around him. They're the ones who want world domination, and particularly they want a white supremacist world. And people might listen to me and think that's just insane. I get it. Yeah, some nations want to be like that, but they want to dominate the entire planet. But that's what fascism ends, right? Fascism doesn't stop at borders.
True.
The beginning of World War II was the Nazi regime invading Poland, and that's why World War II happens, because it transcended borders. The idea that, we're just going to have our own little nationalist state here, a white supremacy state, it doesn't happen. I mean,
Yeah.
Israel is an ethno state. They want it for Israelis and Jews only, and anyone else is a second-class citizen. But it's not going to end there. Why do you think Israel's been starting so many wars? They want to take all over the entire Middle East. Fascism is all about pushing beyond your borders. So in a way, imperialism, colonialism is all about world domination. Why would you suddenly stop at, we've got to 10 countries now, that's it? No.
Yeah.
And given that America is the superpower at the moment, of course, they want world domination.
You're so right. You're so bloody right. Who stops at 10 nations when you can get more? It's true. Get more. Yeah, it's a massive imperialist project. You're so right. Really great analysis. Let's go on to our final stories. I'm so conscious of time. Sorry. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. This was a quote from the World Economic Forum based on an essay by Danish politician Ida Auken. I think I said that right. Yet, in the popular political culture, the right has often used this as a term to describe communism. Wow, this is the exact kind of society we are headed towards. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon and one of the richest men in the world, said the quiet part out loud in terms of computer ownership. Back in 2024, Bezos explained that the future of computing isn't ownership, but renting off the cloud.
So AI, you have to remember, modern AI is a horizontal enabling layer. It can be used to improve everything. It will be in everything. This is most like electricity. I went to a brewery in Luxembourg many years ago now. In fact, this trip was one of the little tiny catalysts for the founding of AWS. And the brewery was 300 years old. This company making beer for 300 years. A lot of the oldest companies in the world are breweries, by the way. I don't know why this is. And they were very proud of their history, and they had a museum. And in that museum was an electric power generator, 100 years old. And because when they wanted to improve the efficiency of their brewery with electricity, there was no power grid. So they had to build their own power station. So they made their own electricity. And at that time, that's what everybody did. If a hotel wanted electricity, they had their own electric generator. And I looked at this and I thought, this is what computation is like today. Everybody has their own data center. And that's not going to last. It makes no sense. You're going to buy compute off the grid. That's AWS. We were doing it internally at Amazon for ourselves, and the APIs were created. That's a very interesting story in its own right. But this is, these kind of horizontal layers, like electricity and compute, and now artificial intelligence, they go everywhere. I guarantee you, there is not a single application that you can think of that is not going to be made better.
Why can't we just send him to space? So essentially what he's saying is that one day no one will compute off the grid, which is a euphemism for you won't own it. Not only is this something he is predicting, this is something he and the rest of the oligarchs want. Curtis, what do you make of this?
Well, we did send him to space. The problem is it had a return trip.
This is what I'm saying. Stay there.
So I think we should all... I'm happy to crowdfund for a billionaire if it means a one-way trip, because he ain't going to pay for himself. So that clip, it was from 2024, but it's just as relevant. And obviously he's predicting, and I think quite correctly, the prediction is that more and more things are going to be out of our hands. And okay, he mentioned data centers, but really I think it's the entire thing was euphemism for computers. Basically, and by the way, Amazon and all these other tech giants are massively in favor of AI. You just heard him in that clip. He loves AI. And AI is the reason why RAM is so expensive. Now, most of you are probably clued in about tech. If somebody watching has no idea about tech, RAM is basically memory size, and you can put it into your computer, and the bigger memory, the more powerful your computer typically is. Obviously, there's other components too, right? But RAM is quite cheap, actually. I mean, 32 gigabyte of RAM is quite decent for a computer or a laptop, and it's now becoming unaffordable. You think, why is that happening? The reason why is the rise of data centers, which powers AI, and data centers are buying up all of the RAM. So typically, RAM mostly is sold to the general public, but now all these data centers and companies are buying up all the stock. It's becoming scarce for the rest of the people, and the prices are going up. And what's happening there is people are getting priced out to own or build their own computers. And here we usher the clouds. And this is, I always refer to Yanis Varoufakis and technofeudalism. It was my book of 2025. I mean, there's a debate between people among the left whether is it technofeudalism, is it just capitalism? I digress. What matters is what's actually happening. And essentially, we are going to see a world in which big companies will be selling you computers via the cloud. Now, how that looks like exactly, I don't know. Maybe it's you have to have a subscription just to turn on your bloody laptop, or you have your laptop, it has no access to internet or memory, and you pay 20 quid a month and you get access to like 8 gig of memory, right? Something like that. But what you're seeing is a transfer of ownership from ordinary people to the oligarchs. And what's so ironic is the "you own nothing and be happy" line has been stolen from the right wing to apparently mean communism. And my theory on that is because most people on the right and conspiracy thinkers think that the World Economic Forum is this new world order communist sort of society or whatever. The World Economic Forum is not a conspiracy. It's literally a bunch of capitalists speaking about capitalism. It's just a circle jerk of capitalists saying, oh, there's lots of problems in the world. How can we fix it? That's it. For some reason, the right wing have concocted this idea, oh, it's a communist conspiracy theory. And of course, the World Economic Forum used that phrase, you'll own nothing and be happy, because they were talking about, and I'm not a defender of WEF, by the way, just explain what happens. They were just using an excerpt from an essay from a politician. They weren't saying, oh, we want you to own nothing and be happy. They were understanding, or some people at the World Economic Forum were understanding that we are accelerating into rentier capitalism. But I think a lot of people saw that and thought, oh, they're trying to push this on us. In reality, you'll own nothing and be happy is exactly what capitalism is. And the modes of production between socialism, communism, and capitalism is fundamentally misunderstood. And a lot of people think that communism means you own nothing. There's no personal property. I do think leftists are probably messed up here when we say we should abolish private property, because a lot of people think private and personal is the same thing, right? No, the state won't own your fucking toothbrush. But you are seeing the transfer of ownership, which is supposedly communism, is actually capitalism, and the oligarchs and the few are owning things. And the difference between political and economic systems, socialism, communism, and capitalism, is about ownership. Communism, the common ownership of things. So in reality, a lot of people who say, oh, I want to own my own thing, you're probably a communist or at least a socialist. And if you like giving away your power and the things you own to the 1%, that's capitalism. And that's exactly what's happening. And, Jeff Bezos is celebrating this. And he's using that weird analogy where, I went to a brewery and these brewers had their own electricity generator. These days, you just, hook up to a grid and there we go. But in that particular instance, that's efficient. But it doesn't mean that an oligarch now owns that brewery. The brewery is still owned by the brewers themselves. So to say that's in any way comparable to basically us not having ownership of computer power is not the same. Having cheap technology, because laptops and computers have become extremely cheap due to obviously technology, and the material has become cheaper. Obviously, cheap labor does factor into that. Has sort of democratized tech. It's a really good thing that any person can go to the shop and buy a half decent computer. It's really important for like hacktivists, for example. When the system's broken, people can hack into shit. I'm not endorsing hacking or whatever, but I'm just saying that the option's there. I'll give you a better example. It's a bit more close to home, not as big scale. Netflix. You might be thinking, what's this got to do with Netflix? Well, for a long, long time, 20 years ago, pirating was really popular. Everyone remembers LimeWire, right? You used to give your computer like all the viruses in the world, but you used to get free games, free TV shows, free movies. And then came along, Netflix, and they offered a subscription model, about £5 a month, and it opened you up to a big library of films and TV. And a lot of people switched because people weren't clamoring for free stuff. The appeal for Pirate Bay, for example, wasn't free. People wanted a good quality product or a product that actually delivered, and nothing was around at the time, really. Netflix came onto the market, offered something very cheap, and guess what? Most people paid the price. Now what's happening is you're seeing a resurgence of pirating again because you're seeing Netflix increase their prices. They're adding ads to your streaming. They've made the quality of the video terrible. You've got multiple different streaming platforms. You've got movie production companies having their own streaming services. You're paying 20 quid here to watch one TV show, or you've got to subscribe to Apple to watch another TV show. People are realizing it's not worth it, and they're going back to pirating. And that's, in a way, the democratization of tech. There'll be no other alternative if you've got the billionaires and the oligarchs owning the things that we need ourselves. And that's exactly what's happening under this capitalist system.
Really well said. And I feel like on that note, we should probably go to our comments, shouldn't we? I think Lewis, our producer, is in the background.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going, everyone?
Yes, good, thank you. How are you?
It's been a lovely and great show so far. People have been very welcoming to... They just can't stop talking about us, so thank you very much. Now, regarding the topic that you guys were just talking about, I'd just like to point out a lovely Guardian article that came out yesterday from the Oxfam Inequality Index that just came out yesterday while we're talking about very, very rich people taking all of the money away from everyone. There was a record number of billionaires created last year. There is now 3,000, guys. And go on, closest to guess how much that total value is worth between you. 3,000 billionaires? What would you like to guess?
I don't even think I can even guess.
Curtis?
Something astronomical.
Can you repeat that question? I didn't hear that.
What is the global wealth of billionaires according to Oxfam's new report yesterday? There's now 3,000 of them.
It's so hard to know. I don't know.
Okay, I'll get to the point because I want to get to comments. $18.3 trillion, and their wealth has increased by 81% since 2020.
Someone please get out a violin for these poor billionaires, because what upsets me even more is you've got working class people who say, but they worked so hard. They worked so hard. It's like, shut up. No,
I'd recommend using something more than a violin against them, but I'm just going to say that. Now, regarding comments, we have had quite a few amazing comments today because I will quickly actually come to the super chats and donations and stuff in a second. But obviously, we got lots of love from Sarah being hosting again. We got lots of that. We also had this because we went live accidentally for a few seconds. I didn't realize that Curtis had pressed the live button, and it's my fault for not listening. So my bad.
You're getting fired from your free job.
Pretty much, yeah. And then Michael put see, this is what happens when Sarah isn't producing.
Producer. Yeah, facts.
And Curtis, Becca misses the Tic Tac music from the other intro that we used to have. So just a bit of feedback.
We never used Tic Tac's music. That was just stock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. On to the quick super chats. No,
wait. No. She wasn't talking about the music. Our viewer Tic Tac music.
Yeah.
No, you're right. No, we haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah, we messaged really recently, actually, me and Tic Tac. So, yeah, but I haven't seen him in the thing for ages.
Oh, I got confused. I misinterpreted the comment. My bad. I thought it was like the name of his music. Anyway, Michael gave us £2 and said, Sarah ain't producing tonight in reference to me messing up. So Guys,
it's been a while, to be fair, and I've added a bunch of features to it, which has made it more confusing.
So just to give the audience a bit of insight, there's a few new features, and I haven't produced in a little while, and I was scrolling through, and I was like, what does that mean? And the show's already started, and it was like, this is why, Lewis, you read through the entire script before you start, and check things are going to work perfectly for our amazing audience. So thank you, Michael. Rachel gave us $2, and she put, can anyone in Reform read a map, or is it banned? Well, they probably don't, but a lot of them have private drivers, like Nigel Farage, who was paid. I think Aaron Banks funded his private driver for 2 years, but we won't go into the Russia story.
That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah. And Ride Feather gifted 5 Turn Left memberships.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, in regards to other comments, I did have a very quick update for you guys as well on another story that you were talking about, because in the last hour, a signing ceremony of US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace is scheduled for Thursday at the World Economic Forum. Now, the irony of the right-wing conspiracy theory about the WEF and the fact that Trump is doing all this weird global shit. That is now happening. But plot twist, if everybody doesn't know, Israel and Netanyahu are absolutely furious at Trump about who's on the board and how it's working. And he was invited to the ceremony and he's not going. Ooh, juicy gossip. The
genocidal man is upset.
I didn't get him.
Imagine having a peace board with 2 criminals on the board who were both wanted by the ICC.
Makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Words don't mean anything anymore.
No. They don't mean anything. Okay, back to comments. Oh, I starred so much because it was so good today. So just let's quickly get to it. Trump is trying to distract from the Epstein files. Guys, it's the 1-month anniversary of the Trump administration not releasing the rest of the Epstein files. So
I was also reading there was another attempt to try and get more of the files released, because obviously it was heavily redacted, and the Trump admin blocked it. I mean, his name is all over it. So yeah, I don't think it's just about distracting from the Epstein files, because again, those around him want to do these sorts of things, but it's very convenient for him because yes, Epstein has now dropped off the political landscape. I mean, I think he tried doing it in Greenland and people were still talking about Epstein. Now, not as many people talking about it. It's our duty to point out that he's all over the Epstein list.
And I think it was the Democrats actually posted a video the other day calling him a pedo protector. So at least they're ramping it up a little bit, but they need to go a bit further.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, but they're all talk though. God, is it Dan Frey or something? Frey, one of the mayor of Minnesota, was like, "Fuck ICE, fuck ICE." I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And then, when it came to policy, it's like it's elected the Democrats. I think they're offering more funding for ICE if they don't do certain things. Like they don't oppose the Republican Party.
What I think that's actually a really important topic, though. What you're saying about opposition and taking people on. What a lot of people are doing in Minnesota right now is exactly what people should be doing, and what we might end up doing in the future. Right? People are literally tracking down ICE cars, and they've got networks through Discord. They've got signals. People literally tens of thousands of people in Minnesota own whistles. If they see ICE, they whistle. And did you guys see the story about the pastor who was found out to be an ICE agent? You see this?
No.
Yeah, so somebody discovered that a pastor had signed up to work for ICE, and then protesters literally stormed his church. That's the shit that you should be doing.
Oh, wow.
And it was crazy. It's all over the American news right now. So that is exactly what people need to be doing.
And that's the thing. That's community action.
Direct, yeah.
Why it's so important, because our politicians won't do it for us. You can't rely on the Democrats to stand up against fascism, and it always takes the people to do so. And that is exactly it. Community action is the only thing that's going to stop this, because sure as hell the Democrats won't.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Right. Some of these comments aren't in the order of the stories, but let's just go for it. Zach Zelensky is the only man who can save the UK's economy. Firstly, by fully rejoining the EU, so we can get that 100 billion GDP a year we lost from Putin and Trump's Brexit backing. £700 billion lost. Like, where do we actually stand? I'm curious about this. The reason why I selected this is like, where do people actually stand on rejoining the EU? Because there are a lot of people who are leftists who actually say we should. They actually oppose the EU because it's like it's technically like anti-leftist because it furthers like neoliberalism and capitalism. Or should we rejoin it still while still holding leftist values?
I think we starred the same comment.
Oh,
yeah, because I wanted to basically push back on that, but I'll allow you guys to speak first.
I introduced the concept, so Sarah, you can go if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think rejoining the EU isn't it's not a technocratic fix. I think it's like this is a wider political problem because the same forces that kind of cheerled Brexit kind of still dominate that information space. Like you've got mainstream media, like the donor class, and like the cultural like infrastructure who are willing to kind of tank GDP then admit that they were wrong. So, but Brexit wasn't really about GDP. It was just mostly about reasserting this fantasy of British sovereignty. And that kind of only works if you don't look too hard at foreign direct investment or like labour market integration or global trade blocks. So I do think it's quite an interesting comment about Polanski. I mean, they are one of the few parties willing to kind of name the elephant in the room. Britain, maybe you can push back on this as well, because I don't think my economics is that sharp on it. But from what I understand, Britain is a medium-sized like economy pretending to be like a global empire. And I think that maths kind of stopped working years ago. Rejoining the single market or the EU doesn't just recoup GDP. I think it kind of forces Britain to confront, I guess, the nostalgic trauma that they are immersed in and struggling to get out of losing empire and accepting interdependence. But I think that's the part that many people on the right might find intolerable. But whether Polanski can save the economy, I think, is a bigger question. But I think the point is that the only people offering an adult conversation about Britain's economic position are the ones outside the two-party, two-party duopoly. So I don't know. I can't answer this. I think it's hard.
Curtis?
So yeah, I'm opposing rejoining the EU. The big reason is because they will make us adopt the euro, and that is catastrophic. The worst policy you can think of this country is to adopt the euro. We are very, very lucky that we have a sovereign currency and we have a central bank that prints money, that creates money out of thin air. Because I haven't got time to talk about this, but I'll be very brief. Taxes don't fund public spending. The government literally funds public spending, right? Taxes are used for incentives, good or bad behavior, control inflation. So rejoining the EU on an economic reason doesn't make any sense because we don't need to for an economic reason.
Yeah.
We can rejoin the EU in terms of trade. It will get us better trade deals for sure. But the idea that, we've lost £100 billion worth of GDP, therefore we should go to the EU, that only makes sense if you accept that our economy is like a household budget, when it's not. We can literally create money out of thin air because that's how central banks work. Same with the US. There are many countries that have this, Japan, for example. So the problem, and this is the problem that Greece finds themselves, is that they gave up their own sovereign currency. And when they did that, they gave up power to the Troika, the European Central Bank. And now Greece is in a permanent crisis because it can't print its own money or create its own money to spend on infrastructure, on employment, to create jobs. It has to go to the European Central Bank to borrow money because they control it, because the euro is controlled by the ECB. And for the Troika, they give bailouts to Greece, but they're not big enough where they can transform their economy. They'll give a small amount of bailout money to Greece, where it's just enough to maybe spend a little bit here and then pay back some of the debt that they owe. Whereas if they was given maybe a larger amount of money to fix the economy and then maybe pay the money back. But regardless, Greece doesn't have sovereignty over its currency, and that's the big thing. And if we are made to rejoin the euro to go back in the EU, that is absolutely no go. And any liberal, by the way, if you listen to this, it's why I get so frustrated with liberals when it comes to the EU. They're so bad on it. If any liberal tells you we should adopt the euro to get back to the EU, never fucking listen to them ever again. They're not leftists. They don't know what they're talking about, and that would literally destroy this country. It
But
will. We
perspective,
hardly have the facilities to spend as much money as we want on employment, on public services, and we tax it back out of existence to control inflation, and that's it. But there is literally no limit. We actually have a magic money tree. That's just a fact.
Yeah, it's in my back garden. But Brexit wasn't ever an economic strategy. And I think people need to get outside of this idea that it was an economic strategy. I just think it was a mechanism that for culture wars, essentially, that lined the pockets of those who are higher up. That's how I view Brexit. I always have. I wasn't old enough to vote in it, unfortunately, missed it by a few days. But still, I do think it was an economic strategy. But I think what a waste of time it would be to rejoin with our tail between our legs, hey, can we come back? We'd obviously have to start adhering to things that the EU would say. If they said, bow down, Britain would be like, okay, sure, we made a mistake, blah blah blah. So I don't want us to be in a position like that. I think we have to just take it on the chin. People voted on something that they had no idea what they were essentially voting on because it was so wishy-washy, and now that we are reaping the consequences of those actions. But fuck it, happened.
I'll play devil's advocate though. I feel like the concept of we will have to rejoin, with the euro, and there's no negotiating or anything like that. They can pull that stuff over the smaller countries who've joined the EU over the last few decades, but we still are a power even in the size of the EU. I think it's still only Germany that's bigger than us. We have way bigger. We have a huge military, and we have obviously lots of different types of soft power around the world. We still technically punch above our weight, despite the fact that it's still a lower punch than it was just a few decades ago. This idea that it's only we have to join the euro is not necessarily 100% guaranteed in any way.
Yeah. If that's an option, if we could go back into the EU and you absolutely do not adopt the euro, I would certainly consider it. I wouldn't say yes, let's join, because there's also political fallouts from this as well. I mean, Europe is struggling at the moment because European leaders are so inept. They are absolutely terrible. They cannot read the global sort of powers at the moment. But having said that, we clearly have issues with the USA. And the last thing we want, especially with this de-Yankification movement we're seeing, we don't want closer ties with America, and leaving the EU does, make us a little bit isolated. But, there's many deals we can have with the EU, like a Norway-style deal, closer ties, good trade with them, without officially joining the bloc. But yeah, look, if they were to turn around and say, yeah, you can join without adopting the euro, sure, I consider it. But also, there's a scenario in which they would say, yeah, we won't do that. And then 10 years down the road, we've got very Europhile politicians who get elected in Britain who adopt the euro. I mean, remember, Tony Blair said he wanted to adopt the euro. Imagine if he was still in power now, and he's old and he's only allowed to do 3 terms. But imagine if him or someone who thinks like him was in power, we would have adopted the euro. So I think that was the trajectory of being in the EU anyway. That was why there was a really good left-wing case to leave the EU. The problem is it didn't happen during the referendum. All you got was the Brexiteers and Liberals, which a lot of people thought it was the left. It was a Liberal and Brexiteer debate. There was no left-wing debate, because I do think, yes, they might turn around and say, you can keep your sovereign currency, join the EU. I just think at the end of the day, the way in which the EU formed, I mean, look, we joined the common market in the 70s. No one voted for a political bloc. They voted for an economic bloc, not a political bloc. No one voted to join the EU as it is today. That just happens. Maybe a natural phenomenon, right? So I would envision, especially I think with Britain's diminished role, we are powerful only because we are subservient to the US. We're not powerful alone. Yeah. I don't think the EU looks at us and think, oh, no, we should give in to their demands. We are powerless. We are not the country we once were. I'm not saying we should, by the way, because I'm anti-colonialist, but it's true. We are not the superpower, and we only rely on the US. True. So actually, I think there will be a big movement within the EU to get us to adopt the euro.
I think you're right. I think obviously outside the EU, we're not entirely free. We're just exposed to more US power. But I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see it working. I think I've kind of just accepted the fact that if we rejoin and leave the same domestic class relations in place, then we just go back to 2015 style neoliberalism. And like, I don't like that neoliberalism. I don't like what we're in at the moment. It's just a shit show, I think, either way. So I think it's like we take it on the chin, and unfortunately it happened because people believed some culture war.
Right, we've got loads more comments, but I just thought I'd quickly put Autumn's up, which she said, I'm still calling it a quid, even if we adopt the euro. But speaking of the devil, because you got brought up a minute ago, and I literally mean the devil, Tony Blair is the devil, as Azimi pointed out. And I wanted to, you picked up on the point of like Donald Trump, creating this, the Gaza Peace Board in the way that he's doing it to, create these new alliances. And I just want to point out, I think it was reported in the FT just the other day. Oh, why is someone ringing me? I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Oh, it's my one contact who can bypass my Do Not Disturb. It's not an emergency. She'll ring twice if it is. Anyway, it was reported last week in Haaretz in Israeli media that 4 or 5 different ambassadors from the Middle East spoke to Haaretz saying that Donald Trump is planning to use the Gaza Peace Board to basically create an anti-UN, to basically create these alliances to subvert UN courts, UN law, international law, and this is basically a template. And if you actually look at the Gaza Peace Board plan, the word Gaza is not mentioned. Literally, the word Gaza is not in the document. This is what is believed to be, and it was reported on by the FT as well, a plan to essentially subvert the current international norms and rules, which, we hate the international norms and rules in lots of ways. Lots of us hate the UN. We find it useless and all this type of stuff. But again, it's the same thing what you were just talking about with Brexit. People on the left want to leave the European Union for different reasons than the people who want to leave it on the right. And the same with this plan. We can say we hate the UN, but that doesn't mean that Donald Trump can create a new, power structure in the world, which will apparently, according to the article, be used to manage global power influence and conflicts around the world, which is terrifying, to be honest. Reporting is
on way to a one world government in which particularly the right wing always bang on about. The leftists want this one world government. Like everything they accuse the left of being is just what the right wing want. You see it with ICE, and it's like you're now starting to see anti-ICE people load up on guns, and they're like, this is dangerous. They need to be arrested. It's like, hold on, you're like a gun nut who's like, they're going to take our guns from the government, and then the government is now actually oppressing you. And they're saying, like, stand on my neck, daddy.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move.
It's only Monday, Curtis.
It is only Monday. I'm talking as if it's a Friday show, aren't I?
Yeah, I love it.
I'll quickly move on though, because I want to get through some more. So Arthur put, reform will hold power in some councils now. They will get more before the next general election. I think people will see that they are the same as the Tories and Labour due to how bad they are in local government. I actually completely disagree with this, and not because you're saying anything wrong, Arthur, because it sounds so obvious, right? That if reform do bad in local councils, that of course then people are going to go like, oh, they're really bad, and then we're not going to vote for them. I just don't think there's almost no local council stories that I can think of, except like certain ones that point out like that Birmingham County Council with the bins and stuff like this. I don't feel like anything that happens at the council level, reform putting taxes up, all this type of stuff, the multiple racism scandals that have already happened, I just don't think any of that is going to have really any impact on reform because it relies on the culture and the cult of personality around Nigel Farage.
I actually agree with that. I think the thing that any other party should be worried about is that populist right parties don't actually need to govern well. They just like to be electorally like useful. They just need to be chaotic enough to kind of drag like the political center of gravity to the right, and I think they're doing that quite nicely. UKIP actually did that quite perfectly without ever like running local services. Reform might do the same, even if they crash a few councils into the ground along the way, which I imagine they will. But I think it's an important point, because if they do get tested in the local government before the next general election, then maybe voters will discover that they're not anti-Tory, but I doubt that that'll be the case.
Curtis?
Yeah, I agree with you, Lewis. I think that particularly for reform, they're a national party only, not a local party, and their appeal is all through the lens of national politics. So a lot of their votes in the local councils is like, I just want to vote for reform and that's it. And almost completely separate the party politics and national politics from the local level. Of course, if you vote for a local party and they behave in a bad way, it's because you did that. The Green Party, for example, is very hyper localized, so they become more accountable to the local electorate, especially when they try and get out the vote. People are far more responsive and far more critical. But again, with Reform, yeah, cult of personality. Again, a cult of personality doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like that personality, because as I pointed out earlier, people know that Farage is a bad guy, but it's still a cult of personality, and the brand of Reform is appealing to people that I don't think they really give a shit. Now, of course, they do give a shit in terms of like the council acting badly, but I don't think they're going to make that correlation. And if they do make that correlation, I don't think it's going to sway people to vote. I just think that's generally the case when it comes to sort of local and national politics, and I think Reform get away with that. Of course, there has been multiple stories that come out, not big stories, but Darren Grimes, for example, he's a figurehead, isn't he? He's a deputy leader in Durham County Council, and they had to put up taxes, which is very ironic since the Reform sort of project is to lower taxes or cut taxes. They completely U-turned on that, and I don't think that's going to lose a vote.
They'll just blame the migrants or the woke,
or they'll blame central government. Which, to be fair, you can. It's a legitimate thing to do, by the way, when because the central government sets the budgets for local councils. Absolutely true, and you can say, look, we have to make cutbacks because the central government won't give us money. Absolutely, but if a Reform council makes a bad decision on their own accord, they'll also just blame central government, and people will probably buy it.
I think the only way to actually like really hold Nigel Farage accountable is that you do need those like viral moments, like whether it's in like a debate, whether it's on a panel, where somebody is able to because his movement is built off of storytelling, right? As much as people can just say, oh, it's racism, it's this and that. It's not. He has been able to tell a story, regardless of people like that. He has touched into people's feelings, and they are negative feelings, but he has touched into them, and that is his success. The only way to counter it doesn't matter if Kent County Council had to close 10 care homes or just turn off street lights and stuff like this to save money. That's not going to move the dial. What's going to move the dial is somebody who can tell a better story than him, or tell a really good story about him, and that's the only thing that's ever going to move the dial with Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
Him saying the N-word on camera secretly undercover would probably do him in too, but
it would do him in.
That's the thing. I don't know. It would lose support by his core supporters.
I don't think it would. People would be like, "But that's not what he says." Like, what do you like? They were just gaslighting. Or
it's AI, or you're hearing it. The way to defeat Farage and right-wing figureheads is humiliation and making them weak. Calling them assholes and scary and bad it bolsters that image, because again, this is where I think liberals are very bad at critiquing right-wing figures. They'll say, but he's a really bad man, and people are like, yeah, we know he's a bad man. What, you're not convincing me? I'm still going to vote for him. But if you make him look pathetic and weak, and certainly a puppet, if you say Farage is a puppet for Trump, Trump is his daddy and he's not a strong man, people will respond to that. Especially, by the way, I saw an interesting poll. 67% of British people want us to see want us to retaliate with tariffs back to the US. 67%, plus 23% of Reform voters want us to put tariffs back on the US. That's Reform voters. I think absolutely making Farage like a little bitch for Trump. I think that's going to be.
I can't go with you today.
I know.
I think we should just nuke them. But that's my.
Lewis.
Well, they have control over our nukes anyway, kind of.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They do.
We have no independence on nuclear weapons.
We have zero independence.
I mean, we should just invade them, right? Because that's the word they want. They don't care about international law. They can invade anyone else. So if we just invade them, they can cry, but sorry, but this is what you wanted, right?
Yeah.
We're just doing a values-based world order, not international law.
Anyway, Natalie's asked a great question. Hi, Lewis. Are you coming on Sunday to heaven?
The club.
So no, the reason why Natalie's asking this is because of the Green Party event. Have you guys heard about this?
No, at heaven.
Yeah, so instead of, I'm not advertising this just for the sake of like being like, oh, like we love Greens or anything like this. It's just because it's really good like political campaigning, right? Nigel's been trying to do these like kind of like constant press conferences, like very Trump-esque. Well, in the meantime, the Green Party are hosting a party at Heaven, and for any international listeners, Heaven is like probably like the most famous like LGBTQ gay bar in London, and it's on Sunday the 25th of January, and Zach's going to be there, and there's going to be dancing, and they're going to like raise money, and it's all going to go towards like Green Party members who are going to be elected, hopefully, in the future. And I think that
is the right way to campaign, by the way.
It's a really smart move, yeah. But that's why. By the way, Natalie, sorry, I'm not coming. I'm not coming. I've got some stuff going on, unfortunately, that weekend. So have fun if you're going, Natalie. Oh, somebody else then asked a question about Heaven. I hope that answered all the questions. I liked this from Specs. When you guys were obviously talking about rich people, did anyone listen to Friday's Any Questions? I didn't, but apparently the audience laughed when the Tory mentioned the rich would leave.
Oh, it's breaking through. I like it. I like it.
But we need a really good storyteller about the rich, right? Like Zach. I think Zach's better at it than most, but I think he's got so much more room to get better. I think we need to get like Jeremy Corbyn has been using the same language against the rich since the 70s. Like somebody needs to refresh how we're talking about wealth inequality and money and billionaires. And somebody needs to do that soon, because I think Zach's doing okay at it. I think he could be 10 times better at it. There needs to be a really, really strong voice on this, a really good storyteller, and I don't think we have it.
I think making a morality argument about how how unpatriotic these billionaires are, I think that can cut through. Sometimes just making an economic argument, people don't really feel that. But if you say, screw these people, if they really care about this country, they pay their taxes. Maybe that's one. But yeah, a lot of aggression, I think.
I'm going to do one more question, if that's all right. Because I think it's actually an interesting topic. It's from Mr. Edward Shakespeare.
Oh, Edward.
I'll take China over the US any day. And I think we may have touched on it before in the past at some point, but I think it is an interesting topic, right? It's not about switching sides, but if you were just like a neutral country and you had to pick a superpower to be the bitch of, how do you objectively choose? Because people just by default go to think the US would be better than China just because of democracy and freedoms. And I'm not trying to like play them down, but if you were to argue about like which country is actually worse, which country is either historically or currently doing the most harm to the world, who is actually worse? People will think China's just an evil country because it doesn't have democracy. And guess what? Both countries right now are both being accused of either carrying out and or facilitating genocides. Both countries are, wrecking the planet by imposing their imperialism through different means in the world. Which one do you side with? Who do you be the bitch of?
It's almost too hard to even say, because it kind of goes back to what you were saying about like, it's not about saying that China good and the US bad, or like vice versa. It's like, what kind of global system actually leaves small and medium-sized states with agency rather than just assigning them to one imperial admin block or another? Because like for countries like the UK, especially post-Brexit, like sovereignty isn't just about like waving a flag. It's not about being someone's, like you guys say, like their bitch and someone else's project. It's whether that's like Washington's security order or like Beijing's like development order. Like there's like, they're almost two sides of the same coin. So I don't think that you're looking at agency or autonomy if you are a working person. I'm only going to speak with the UK, a working person in the UK. I think it's just a route to alignment, which is a different thing entirely.
Curtis?
I think Edward makes a really good point. Of course, to preface this, yes, we don't want to be anyone's sort of lackey for imperialism. Of course, we can talk about that, but within the current system we're in, China's largely soft power, whereas the US has turned to hard power, and I think that's really important. Now, of course, China isn't anti-imperialist. It engages in imperialism, of course, but if you look at the rise of Britain, the rise of the USA, that was fully because of colonialism and imperialism. That's where we got our power from. Whereas China, once again, I'm not making excuses for them when they do have imperialist instincts. By the way, all states are inherently imperialistic because states are selfish. Give anyone the chance, right? Even the states we like, give anyone the chance, they will be imperialist because states are inherently selfish. Having said that, China, their rise in global power has been largely through economics. They've built things and they've traded onto the global market. They've sold goods to the global market because unlike the West, which engaged in neoliberalism and selling everything off and turning ourselves into a service economy where we end up becoming buyers, not sellers, China invested in their economy and they make things. And that's a long-term sustainable strategy. The crazy thing about Thatcherism and neoliberalism is not sustainable because once you run out of things to sell, you're just going to be a buyer. And China now sells everything. So they've largely become, and soon they're going to be the number one superpower. They've done it largely through creating things and selling it onto the market. They've done it in, again, I'm not saying they're a good state. Again, there's no such thing as a good or bad state. I don't think they're just inherently selfish, but they've done it at least better than the amount of bloodsheds that the USA and the UK have done. So if you were to ask me if I had to choose between a state right now, I'd choose China because one, they're an economic powerhouse, whereas America is massively investing in a bubble, which is AI, which is going to burst. Two, I think they're more stable and sustainable. They care more about their own country as opposed to trying to be an imperialist of the entire world. Again, it's not that they don't have anti-imperial. It's not that they don't have imperialist instincts. They absolutely do, like Taiwan, for example. But I feel like they're a safer bet. And the final thing is they're a more viable long-term state. The US is at the embers, at the end of its empire. Trump is the dying embers of it, whereas China is going to be very powerful for a very, very long time.
And I wanted to just follow up with this comment because it's on the same thing. But China's soft power is a road and a hospital. US kills your democratically elected leader. Not completely true, right? I have to push back on that slightly because you need to look at the effects of Chinese imperialism, especially across Africa, right? Because they have caused so many problems and deaths in Africa by people fighting over the resources that they want to lease out to Chinese companies that they can come in and mine. There was that recent story just a few months ago of like one of the Chinese mines, I think it was, basically leaked and contaminated into a major river, which could poison literally tens of millions of people. They are causing problems and deaths, just not gun to your head deaths, but they know that their actions are objectively and morally, they are doing bad things.
Yeah, I'm probably downplaying. Look, I'm downplaying the imperialism of China, but I think that China's going to be around longer than it is for the US. And I know maybe I'm naive, but I happen to think if we had a closer ties with China, they're not going to turn around and start, attacking its own sort of allies. Trump is the guy's brain is gone. You don't know what he's going to do the next minute. So
yeah.
And let's not forget what they're doing to the Uyghurs. And again,
of course, yeah. Which, by the way, a lot of people seem to
They forget. Yeah, so that's why I said I couldn't pick either. China's influence in Africa is massive. I think emotionally it's quite easy to say, let's go for the US. The US at this very moment in time seems to be openly courting authoritarian allies and rewriting international law and creating their own global stage. But I think China is very, very covert in the way that they enact their imperialism, and they're kind of just with Russia doing whatever they're doing or whatever. So scary times. I think we just need to reduce our dependency on these sort of nations. I want to reduce our dependency on them. I want to increase our leverage, but I don't know if that's
maybe we could go back to who was that annoying Tory? She was the woman who had the PhD who said that we should stop relying on global markets and go back to eating turnips. Who was that? Do you remember she was deputy prime minister for 2 days under Liz Truss. What's her name? Already forgotten her. Someone will say it in the comments. She was so annoying. But yeah, do you remember the whole turnip controversy? Teresa Coffey. Someone just put coffee. Teresa Coffey. That was it. Yeah, she said we stop relying.
No, what's I don't know.
Yeah, she said, we'll have to get used to eating turnips, basically. Thank you, commenters. Anyway, right. I think that's it for the comments.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Lewis.
I will leave you to it.
Thanks so much for. Oh, I do that all the time, and I'm always like, Curtis, I can't take the comment off. Thank you so much, Curtis, for your insight and for your analysis. It's been nice to kind of be back in front of the camera. And
I've missed you so much.
I've
And obviously, know you've been
missed
behind the scenes, but you hosting is fantastic.
I've missed.
And I love our duo.
Yeah, literally,
Yeah.
just the iconic duo. I'm so here for it. But
I think
no,
I had too
thanks.
much coffee today, though. I think
I haven't had one cup of coffee, to be fair. So
fair.
But thanks so much to Curtis, and thank you to all of you. God, yeah, what a nice first show back. And with that though, please don't forget to help us out if you can, whether that's with money or just by liking and sharing the video. But I'm really, really grateful. I think it's great. We have a great community, and that's something I'm always going to say in every single show ever. But I'm sending love out to you all. You've been watching Turn Left Media's Normal Ireland show with episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Have a great rest of your evening.